This week on the show, we're entering the rat's nest to look at these rodents' impact on public health. Hello and welcome to Health Wanted. From WABE and Emory-University's School of Public Health, I'm Laurel Bristow. Each week, we cover your need-to-know public health topics and break down the science behind them in our pursuit of better health. If you have a question for us to answer in a future show, send me a message to healthwanted@wabe.org, or you can also call and leave me a voicemail at 404-888-3630. And while you're at it, we welcome you to subscribe, like, and comment on this video. Whatever suits your fancy. Ratus, so nice they named it twice. Rats are all over, literally and figuratively. They're an exclamation, a classic villain, masters of mazes and culinary cunning. They might even be listening to this show with you as they chew through the wires of your home or automobile. They're ever present in our society and one of the gilded vectors of disease on the front of my alma mater, the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Rat is actually a general term that encompasses many different and potentially not even related animals. We use it to refer to black rats, Norway rats, people who can't keep their mouth shut, naked mole rats, your ex, kangaroo rats, pack rats, and many others. It's thought the term rat, when it comes to those who would be disloyal, originated from the animal's habit of fleeing a sinking ship. A bit unfair to fault a natural survival instinct, but a very poignant visual metaphor. Usually, when people are talking about rats, they mean either the black rat, Rattus rattus, or the Norway rat, Rattus norvegicus, that run, or scurry, the gamut of health. On one end of the spectrum, we have a view of rats as bringers of disease. It's probably the most common view of rats. There's very few cultures that aren't disgusted by the creatures. Rats are viewed as sneaky, evasive, and dirty. They will move into your home and steal from you, leaving only their droppings as thanks. A contributing factor to this disgust with rats likely stems from how many of them there are. Rats are polygynandrous, mating with multiple partners and sharing the burden of child rearing as a group. They're the originators of the polycule, though they have an affinity for mazes over board games. A female rat can have broods of around 8 babies 5 times a year, with a gestation period that's less than a month. 2 rats can produce 40 offspring in just a year. So those babies can go on to have babies of their own in as little as 3 to 5 months, a timeline that can cause exponential growth of the population. Rats are also born naked, a fact not really relevant to the topic of this show, other than I wanted to tell you that yes, I read that fact and was deeply disappointed after having the quick realization the authors meant without fur and not without clothes, implying that at some point later in life, rats learn to curate a fit. A bursting rat population can mean competition for food, which emboldens the animals to live in the shadows alongside humans and take whatever is left unattended. A bit unfair to associate rats with filth just because they eat garbage. After all, we're the ones leaving out the garbage for them to eat. But close contact with rats does come with health risks. I'm sure the first rat-borne illness that jumps to everyone's mind is the Black Death. In the 14th century, the plague ravaged Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, killing an estimated 25 million people. The sickness spread so quickly and efficiently, it was believed to be the result of divine punishment. God was killing everyone for being bad, which is a very convenient excuse if what you really want to do is banish or kill people you deem heretics. A story of ye old purge. In reality, the plague was caused by the bacteria Yersinia pestis, spread through infectious respiratory droplets or bites of infected fleas. And these fleas were spread by rats, stowing away on ships bound for new worlds just like a hairy little Jack Dawson. By the way, calling the brown rat a Norway rat is a bit of a misnomer. This type of rat originated from Asia, but was probably named after they were seen exiting a Norwegian ship docked in an English harbor. While it's likely that tiny sailor rats helped bring the plague to new locations, recent computer models for the spread of Black Death indicate it's more likely that humans were the disgusting flea-bitten mongrels who were primarily responsible for the explosion of disease. Requiring a flea to bite an infected human, and then bite and infect a rat, and then a new flea to bite that rat and then infect a new human would have caused a much slower progression than fleas simply jumping from person to person. Rat bite fever is a disease which we are much more sure that rats are responsible for. If we weren't, the name would be a bit embarrassing. The majority of rat bites happen in children under 10 or adults who are otherwise incapacitated. These bites can become infected with a variety of bacteria, causing illness that ranges from fever, headaches, and muscle aches to arthritis. Many of these pathogens can actually be spread by rat saliva without a direct bite, but through respiratory secretions. So be sure to remind any rats in your home to cover their coughs and sneezes. Other diseases can be spread by the urine and feces of rats, like leptospirosis, salmonella, hemorrhagic fevers with renal syndrome, some hantaviruses, and even roundworms. So it's best to not try and live in peace with rats if they're in your home, particularly in your kitchen. These days, we know Mpox as a disease that can be transmitted person to person via close contact. But in the early 2000s, when it was still called monkeypox, it was known as a zoonotic disease, meaning spread from animals to humans, that had its first introduction into the United States thanks to rats. Well, it was really thanks to infected Gambian giant rats that had been imported to the States from Ghana that then infected the prairie dogs that they were housed with. Those prairie dogs were distributed to pet stores and at pet swaps and ultimately infected 71 people across the Midwest. Apparently, there's a big market for little dogs there. Unfortunately, rats can also be the unwitting vectors of disease for other animals. Rats that have been infected with the parasite Toxoplasmosis gondii lose their fear of cat odor, making them more likely to get eaten. It's an evolutionary advantage that the parasite has because it can only complete its life cycle and replicate in the gut of the cat. So the parasite turns the rats into little Uber Eats delivery drivers without them knowing that they are what's on the menu. Rats can also cause huge ecological damage when introduced into a new territory. Their introduction into Easter Island is thought to have wiped out the palm trees because they ate all the nuts. They've also been implicated in the decline of bird populations on small islands from eating chicks and eggs. In New York, they've apparently learned to kill pigeons by pouncing on them like a wildcat, though whether that's a good or bad thing is debatable. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have the hero rat, helping to create a healthier world. Here we find rats like the mighty lab rat, responsible for an incalculable number of scientific advancements. Rats and humans have about 30,000 genes, 95% of which overlap between the species, making them an ideal candidate for genetic manipulation. Rats are also incredibly social creatures, whose behavior mimics that of humans, making them ideal for behavioral research. With bigger bodies than mice, they're also more ideal for research on the organ systems, as they are easier to see. And some rats are doing even more than providing a body for scientific research. African giant pouched rats have a keen sense of smell that's proving able to save lives. This particular species is the largest species of rat in the world. They average around 3 pounds, but can get up to 9 pounds and measure 2 to 3 feet in length. But before you start picturing Wesley fighting an ROUS in the fire swamps, know that these, big guys are far from violent villains. These are working rats, donning orange safety vests and sniffing out the chemicals found in forgotten but still active landmines in places like Cambodia that pose a hazard for people living there. The rat's small stature means they don't risk setting off the explosives. A single rat can clear a tennis court-sized area in just 30 minutes, a task that would take a human several days to safely complete. One rat, named Ronan, recently set a record for clearing over 100 landmines in his 4 years of work. This keen sense of smell is also being used to detect tuberculosis. As you know, despite the fact that TB is the #1 infectious cause of death in the world, not a lot of money has been put into updating diagnostics. As a result, many places still rely on staining samples and checking them under a microscope for signs of the bacteria. The accuracy of this technique is dependent on a number of factors, from technician skill to lab equipment to stage of infection. But now, giant rats have been trained to sniff out the bacteria in samples, acting as a double check after the microscopy is done. And they're doing a pretty good job. One meta-analysis found that rats were more accurate at differentiating between TB samples and controls than a single stain screening, allowing them to catch positive cases that would have been missed. It's incredible work that's not only saving lives, but also rehabbing the image of the giant pouched rat. It's the same species responsible for the Mpox outbreak in the US in 2003, but I think we can forgive them for that now. Whether you see rats as a scourge on the earth or an unappreciated hero, you probably don't want them in your home. Uninvited, that is. And major cities agree. In 2023, New York City appointed a rat czar to try and get the city's unofficial population under control. But it's a more difficult task than you might think. Ferrets used to be the control method of choice for rats gorging themselves in American granaries in the early 20th century. One need only to hire the local ferretmeister to release a few fuzzy, murderous noodles, and the animals would literally ferret out the pests, either killing them or driving them into the waiting jaws of farm dogs. Rat traps have been popular for a long time, though the technology never really changes. Trap the rat, kill the rat, dispose of the body, which still requires you to go searching for a corpse or risk a funky smell. One inventive chap registered a patent in 1882 for a device that was less about trapping the rodent and more about shooting it with a full-sized handgun if the animal's weight triggered the device. Potentially the most American version of pest control possible, and yes, the inventor was from Texas. Poison replaced the popularity of ferret hunting, but it doesn't work well to control large populations. For an animal that eats literal garbage, rats have a rather sensitive palate, and poisons can be ineffective because the rats feel a little sick after a bite or two and stop eating the bait. Rats that have been poisoned but are still mobile can also be picked up by birds of prey, putting those animals at risk of poisoning as well. Exterminators can trick rats into eating blood thinner-laced meals, which causes the animals to slowly die from internal bleeding, a rather gruesome death that takes time. New York has taken to injecting rats' nests with dry ice, which lets off carbon dioxide, causing the rats to go to sleep and never wake up. But with the generational turnover, the populations never seem to stay low for long. For Health Wanted, I'm Laurel Bristow. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you next week.